Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is, what if Naruto had done well in the Chunin exams part 1? And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. The second stage of the Chunin exams was supposed to be a large battle royal for the various teams to get Earth and Heaven scrolls, one each then arrive at the central tower. Team 7, led by Sasuke Uchiha, to Naruto's chagrin, was making good progress. They managed to defeat 2 teams and secure extra Earth scrolls, having 3 in total. However, everything went to shit when Naruto, after returning from a pee break, was blasted away by a powerful gust of wind. Followed by appearance of the nightmare of a sound ninja who took sadistic pleasure in attacking Sasuke and Sakura. Naruto, thanks to his ingenuity and shadow clones, managed to kill the massive snake that was attempting to eat him and rejoin his teammates against the weird sound ninja. The battle became even more intense thanks to the inclusion of Naruto, who was subtly getting enhanced by the Nine Tails chakra throughout the fight. He was darting all over the place, punching and slashing at the snake-like ninja. Massive gusts exploded from the clashes between the two monsters. In the distance observing the fight, Sakura was finding it hard to breathe under the weight of the sound girl's chakra and the evil feeling coming from Naruto. Sasuke was silently observing, finding it impossible to force his body into action. Orochimaru glared at the blonde after their latest clash. He was starting to feel the Nine Tails chakra burn his hands. His movements are becoming sharper. The boy has no real talent for ninjutsu if Kabuto's Rakan is correct, which explains the lack of jutsu so far. He's a loudmouth and seems to be similar to how that fool Jiraiya was at that age, the attack first ask questions later type. I could kill him in an instant. Though it's strange, the longer I fight him the better he responds to my movements. I suppose his lineage simply wouldn't allow him to be completely talentless. He mused. The hidden snake nin decided to cut the battle short and seal off the Biju to deal with the blonde. It was time to mark Sasuke and leave. He spent more time here than he planned. He was sure that the old bastard or at the minimum the Anbu were on the way thanks to the large quantities of chakra being thrown around. Naruto tried to dodge. He really did. He could clearly see the freak coming at him, but no matter how hard he tried his body couldn't move in time. It was more frustrating than any fight he's had with Sasuke, who was frozen watching the battle. The snake was simply so much faster than him it was impossible to move in time. A hand that shone with chakra, each finger holding an elemental symbol on it, was slammed into Naruto's stomach right over the Nine Tails seal. Naruto's eyes widened in immense pain as he fell over, almost passing out instantly. He would have fallen hundreds of feet if it weren't for Sakura's quick thinking, who threw a kunai to snag his jacket on the tree to catch him. The last thing Naruto heard before the darkness took him was Sakura calling out to Sasuke. Which was just typical. He was likely about to die, and she calls for Sasuke. The Nine Tails, or rather its chakra, having been cut off from Naruto's chakra due to the additional seal, allowed something to happen that had been impossible ever since Naruto was 20 minutes old. All the chakra that was in his body was wholly his own. Nothing good came from imbalance. The entire purpose of the second stage was to teach this. If you're too focused on your physical strength, or Earth, you'll lack the mental strength, or Heaven, to succeed as a Chunin. Naruto, due to having the yang half of the Nine Tails sealed within him, was overflowing with physical chakra, and had a major deficit of yin or spiritual chakra. This stunted his body in several ways. It was because of this that he was so hyper. It was because of this that he was unable to control his chakra like others were able to. Considering he had to subconsciously overcome the imbalance that was his overabundance of yang chakra, it was no wonder simple jutsu escaped him. He was, unknowingly, having to siphon out the massive quantities of extra yang chakra and bolster his lacking yin side and somehow arrive at the ratio to perform jutsu. But now that the Nine Tails chakra that had been slowly dripping into his network since he was born was cut off, it allowed Naruto's body to reach his natural equilibrium of mind and body, yin and yang. It allowed his soul, the core of his and of all shinobi's power, to fight back and bring forth all of its potential after being denied it since his birth. Naruto didn't know this, no one knew this, but he had been born with tremendous power. It was there just out of reach for his whole life due to the imbalance of his chakra. The leaves and trees swayed lightly, clouds in the sky started to move away. Animals throughout the forest perked up on instinct. All of nature knew that a metamorphosis was taking place. It was as if the entire world was welcoming Naruto's rebirth. Naruto's body was correcting itself after so long. Like a free diver coming up after a long swim, it was taking a deep breath that was impossible for nearly 12 years. Allowing his birthright to emerge and change the very balance of the world. It had been a rough couple of days for Team 7. Sakura Haruno was currently fighting 3 sound ninjas with all her might, or what was left of it. The ninja in question found it amusing to taunt her with their strength and torture her by not attacking all at once to just finish the fight. She ran a hand through her now much shorter hair. Sadly, it took so very long to get it to that length. Oh well, the ugly sound girl had to go for her hair, despite taunting her by saying caring about hair was for children. Seemed she was just jealous because she was ugly and had terrible split ends and took it out on her. Honestly, how hard was it to use conditioner? Snapping her thoughts away from the dumb bitch, she looked to her 2 teammates as they laid next to each other completely unconscious. Last she checked, Sasuke was running a fever and Naruto's chakra wouldn't settle, making it hard for her to stay hidden. Yet another annoyance. Even in this state he's causing problems. I'm gonna smack the hell out of him after this. She roared in her head as she threw another volley of shuriken at the 3 sound ninja in front of her. Ha! Is this the best you have, you stupid bitch? Shouted the one with strange arms and spiky black hair. Sakura hadn't bothered remembering their names. There was ugly bitch, weird arms and mummy face. God, Naruto was rubbing off on her. She didn't let the taunt get to her, but she was at the end of her rope. She was awake for well over 2 days watching both of her teammates and had been fighting for a while against these 3. They weren't really coming at her due to all the traps in the area, but she's been hit by several air blasts that she didn't have a good way to block from weird arms. Desperation was starting to take hold as her already small reserves of chakra were nearing zero. Please, I need one of you to get up. She thought while gripping her last kunai. The sound ninja with his face covered in bandages stepped forward. I will ask this once again, hand over Sasuke Uchiha and we will leave you and your other teammate alive. Dosu, why are we bargaining? We should just kill. The angry boy was interrupted by a wave of chakra exploding into the air. All the ninja in the area. Team 10 in the bushes, Team Guy in the trees, the sound team and Sakura all felt the chakra blast into existence over the immediate area. Each of them felt sweat fall down their foreheads as the weight of the chakra fell upon them. It was larger than any of them have ever felt by orders of magnitudes. Even the sound ninja that were subjected to the terrifying presence of Orochimaru could only shake in fear at the feeling of such power. They didn't know what to do. None of them spoke as it was becoming difficult to breathe due to the pressure. Unknown to the ninja in the clearing, it wasn't just them feeling it. Everyone felt it. It only lasted an instant to those outside the forest of death. Everyone who was able to sense chakra beyond a basic level felt their nerves scream at them, telling them a predator had just emerged. The third Hokage in his office felt his battle instinct flare to the max, causing him to turn to the forest in worry of who at that level managed to infiltrate the village during the exams. He was already signaling his personal guard to move out. Jiraiya the Toad Sage, who was sitting in a tree overlooking the hot springs in the southern part of the Leaf Village, snapped his pen and instinctively flared his chakra to prepare for battle. Unfortunately, the women in this particular spring were ninja and pounced on the pervert after noticing his chakra. Kakashi Hatake dropped his book. Might Guy fell from his handstand. Asuma Sarutobi dropped his cigarette. Kurenai Yuhi nearly tripped over herself as she walked home. The Anbu were frantically moving into action. The barrier squad members nearly passed out. All over the village hidden in the leaves, shinobi were feeling the pulse of chakra that signaled the birth of the one who would change everything. They would likely pass out in shock if they knew it was coming from the knucklehead Naruto Uzumaki of all people. In the clearing, it was Sakura to figure it out first. She was the closest in proximity to Naruto and managed to turn her head towards him to see a minuscule amount of chakra glowing around his body. It was blue in color, and it was partially translucent, but she could see it covering him, and her mind made the only connection that made sense. Naruto, she managed to say as the chakra pulse was slowly dying out. Her voice caused everyone from the leaf to turn to the unconscious blonde in shock. The sound ninja looked to her blonde teammate nervously. In the next moment, the chakra was gone from the area. Everyone was able to breathe normally and wipe the sweat from their faces. Some, particularly those who knew Naruto, chalked it up to a weird fluke and tried to forget about it. Till Naruto stood up. The air around the blonde seemed different. Almost as if it was waiting for his command, as if the world itself was waiting for him to demand something so it could happily oblige. The hairs on the back of everyone's neck stood up, as if a massive tiger was standing right behind them staring at their necks with drooling fangs. Again, it only lasted a moment before the feeling went away. Sakura looked to her now awake teammate nervously. Naruto, are you okay? She asked quietly, considering there were 3 enemies listening. Naruto took a deep breath and opened his eye to take in the scene around him. In a single second he was able to figure out what was going on, which was strange, he mused. His mind had never been this clear. He could tell everything that was going on. There were 2 teams just watching the fight, one in the trees above them. He recognized them as the Bushy Brow Squad. Then in the bushes were his former classmates, all staring at him with sweat visible on their faces. Shikamaru in particular looked seriously spooked. Sakura, it seemed, was defending both himself and the bastard from the sound team, all standing in defensive positions, likely trying to figure out their next course of action now that he was awake. Based on how Sakura looked, exhausted, bruised, and she was nearly out of chakra, she wasn't winning the battle. Your eyes. Sakura whispered in shock. While staring at him, she noticed something else. Your whiskers are gone. This time at full volume, as she couldn't fathom what had happened to her teammate. The rest of the Leaf Ninja noticed what she was pointing out now that she mentioned it. Naruto's eyes were still blue, but they held a glow to them that was unnatural. They held an image of power that unsettled any who looked into them. While his face was free of his whisker marks somehow, Ino in the bushes thought it was a shame as they were cute. Unknown to everyone, the whiskers were a sign of the imbalance of Nine Tails chakra within his body, and now that he was at equilibrium they faded from his face. Like how both the previous holders held no marks signifying their status as Jinchuriki, neither did Naruto now. Naruto turned to her and felt his mind go into a shock for a millisecond. Now that he was really focusing, he could see everything: the chakra in the air, the chakra flowing through the trees, the residual chakra of jutsu that were used. If he focused hard enough, he could tell what type of jutsu had been used earlier. It was too much information. He couldn't focus. Then in the next second he somehow acclimated and he ignored the thousands of stimuli to look at his teammate once again. What do they want? Naruto questioned calmly, ignoring her comments, as he pointed to the 3 sound ninja. Before Sakura could answer, the loud one with the strange arms yelled at him, "Hey! Ya stupid blonde bastard!" Were. No one saw it, no one could follow it more than a faint blur, but before anyone knew it, Naruto crossed the distance between himself and the sound ninja to slam his fist into the boy's chest ruthlessly. There was a faint glowing trail of blue chakra from Naruto's fist as he flooded his body to enhance himself. The air was displaced around him from the force behind the impact. Leaves flew away, the ground where Naruto pushed off from was cratered. Rock Lee, observing in the trees, was blown away as he was unable to follow the attack properly. He's become very dangerous. were the collective thoughts of Neji and Shikamaru as their highly strategic minds reassessed the blonde's capabilities from that maneuver, and they didn't like their odds. The sound ninja who took the hit coughed up blood before flying back to a tree, slamming into the base completely out cold. If his chest wasn't moving slightly, everyone would have thought he was killed by the attack. Sakura couldn't believe it. Hell, none of the Leaf Ninja could. The boy who clumsily and awkwardly fought alongside too many clones to coordinate properly did that. Naruto stood up and shook his fist off. Who the hell was that guy? He asked Sakura with a confused tilt of his head. Well, he was attacking us to get to Sasuke. All three of them were. She answered with a glare to the two remaining sound ninja and a vindictive flare in her eyes. Hell yeah, Naruto. I don't know what's going on, but kick those jerks' asses. Cha. Naruto turned to them and then back to Sakura. For real, they seem pretty weak. He asked with a frown while pointing his thumb towards the ninja in question. He had looked at their chakra. The amount, density, nature, how and where it was channeled, all of that, and he just couldn't consider them anything more than small fry. Then he turned to the other Leaf Ninja surrounding them. Also, why are all of you just watching this? Do you want to take our scrolls or something? He asked while rubbing the back of his head, trying to figure out who he was going to have to fight. Six Leaf Genin felt their eyes widen in shock as the blonde revealed that he knew they were there. Team 10 stood from the bushes, Shikamaru still visibly sweating. That chakra wasn't normal. It felt terrifyingly powerful, and I know it came from him. Those eyes, the change in his body, whatever happened. I want no part of it. We were going to jump in if Sakura couldn't handle it. Shikamaru gulped. Both Ino and Choji knew to let him take the lead here and stayed quiet. Naruto smiled. Ah, that's nice of you, Shikamaru. Bushy brow, are you guys doing the same? He asked to Team Guy standing in the trees, now visible to everyone else. Neji stepped forward before Lee could answer. No, we were merely observing. We are leaving. With that, he and his team left in a hurry, Lee doing so at the glares of his teammates as they knew he wanted to speak to the blonde. Which they adamantly refused to allow at the moment, since they didn't know what Naruto would do next if they stuck around too long. Why are they running off? Naruto wondered aloud. Well, not like their team isn't weird. I mean, anyone with a sensei that has eyebrows like that is surely crazy. Right, Sakura? He laughed while looking to his teammate with a grin. She could only nod dumbly, completely shocked at the change in tone of the situation. Before, it was a life or death battle that she was slowly losing hope of winning, and now Naruto has made it almost like a social gathering with no real danger. Dosu, the leader of the three sound ninja, felt his heart settle back down and knew when to cut his losses. We will retreat without fight if you allow us. As an offering, here is our scroll, he said while setting down their heaven scroll. Naruto watched as they picked up their teammate before fleeing into the forest. Guess they didn't want to fight anymore. He laughed lightly, then clapped. Well then, I guess they were terrified of my sheer awesomeness, Sakura picked the sleeping princess up and let's get moving, we have the scroll we needed now. He ordered with lazy smile on his face. Sakura twitched at being ordered by her idiotic teammate. You know what? She met Naruto's eyes, causing her to flinch, and went to pick up Sasuke without a fuss. He's so solid, she mentally squealed while rubbing Sasuke's muscles as she carried him. Naruto stared dumbly at her for a moment, before letting his eyes roam over Sasuke's form. What the hell? Who put such corrosive chakra into him? When did that happen? Why is it attacking his body and chakra network? What the hell? Does that enhance him and cause withdrawals like a drug? Who could create that? Who would create that? Who would do such a terrible thing to Sasuke? That strange sound girl. The hell did I miss? Naruto didn't realize it yet, but he thought all of that in blink of an eye as his mind was able to process information hundreds of times faster now thanks to his now activated bloodline. Hey Shikamaru, are you guys coming with us? We're headed to the tower. He called out to Team 10, who were still frozen in the bushes watching the events that just happened. While tempted, Shikamaru shook his head. We don't have the necessary scrolls yet. We'll see you there, he answered before rushing off, dragging both Choji and Ino behind him, the latter of which looked like she wanted to comment before being pulled away. Sakura watched them leave numbly. She didn't believe for a moment that they would have helped had it gotten worse. Had it not been for Naruto's new terrifying presence asking them why they were here, she doubted she would have even seen them in the first place. She was sure they would have stepped in either right before she died or right after, hopefully the former. Maybe I wasn't ready for this test, she thought sadly. She was behind Sasuke and even Naruto before entering the exams, and it was the trials of the forest that hammered that home. Naruto, completely unaware of Sakura's inner thoughts, walked over to Sasuke and jabbed a finger overflowing with chakra into Sasuke's upper spine with a frown. If he was right and what he was seeing was correct, then that should slow the spread of that evil chakra into his system. Sakura felt the impact and spun around to Naruto with a glare. The hell did you just do? She questioned him fiercely, protectiveness of Sasuke overpowering her unease around Naruto. Naruto raised his hands with a smile, hopefully slow the spread of that chakra from the mark on his neck. Let's get going, we're not that far from the tower, he answered lightly. Sakura didn't know how to respond to that and just decided to follow him silently. Her head was starting to hurt at the changes Naruto just went through. It took them 2 hours of walking to get to the tower. Naruto dealt with 3 teams that tried to ambush them at lightning speed, and they made it to the tower without much hassle. Sakura was done trying to figure out what was going on with Naruto and just accepted that he was somehow way better than before and followed behind him tiredly. At this point she just wanted a shower and a bed, she didn't care anymore. Sasuke was heavy on her shoulders, and it wasn't nearly as fun carrying him anymore. Inside the tower they saw a sign telling them a riddle concerning heaven and earth. Sakura didn't even bother reading it, she let Naruto give his new brain a go at it. Naruto read it over a few times before snapping his fingers. We need to open one of each type of scroll at the same time, he exclaimed happily. Sakura sighed. Sure, let's give it a go. Wahoo! Naruto cheered as he opened both at the same time while wiggling in place, excited at what was to come. Sakura felt her exhaustion fully hit her and unceremoniously dropped her crushed to the floor, then sat on the ground. She was even more tired watching Naruto's excited attitude. An explosion of smoke came from the scrolls, and from it emerged their teacher from the academy, Iruka. At first, he smiled at Sakura, then frowned in worry at the unconscious Sasuke. Turning to Naruto, he felt his heart stop. The chakra coming from him was the same as the terrifying pulse from earlier. If it wasn't for the fact that it contained no traces of Nine Tails chakra, he would have believed the seal was broken and the demon was free once again. What the happened to Naruto? He thought in shock, unable to form words. He didn't even want to mention the glowing eyes that made his head spin. Naruto didn't know nor care about the internal thoughts of Iruka and just waved happily. Iruka-sensei. Long time no see. We finally finished up in the forest. Thank goodness, cause there's bunch of weirdos in there, I'm tellin' ya. He laughed. Iruka chuckled nervously. Is that right? Well, I was supposed to tell you about the meaning behind heaven and earth, but I think we need to get Sasuke to the medics, and Naruto, I think you may need to see them too. Naruto waved his hand back and forth. No, I'm fine, not hurt at all. Sakura is out of chakra though, and her coils are pretty strained. Also, someone needs to look at Sasuke's neck mark, it's poisoning him with chakra, he informed Iruka while picking his ear. Iruka looked at Sasuke's neck and gasped in recognition, then turned to Naruto in confusion at his knowledge to what was going on. Sakura just sighed from her place on the ground. She knew Iruka-sensei would catch up. Naruto spent the remainder of the time before the second part of the exams finished in his room, just staring out the window into the forest and thinking. He didn't really get it when he woke up the first time, but he was starting to figure out how his eyes worked now. He'd have to think up a name for his eyes. They were clearly an ability similar to Sasuke's Sharingan. The best way to describe it would be as if someone who saw the world in the earliest, most basic version of a television, now saw it through the latest cutting-edge monitor that the hospitals used. He instinctively understood chakra, and could control it with the closest thing to perfection. Not to mention he was able to remember things he saw perfectly and process information at extremely fast speeds. Naruto could see everything in incredible detail. He could even focus and see things in even greater detail than his normal vision, like from a tree to the individual threads that made up the leaves. He flooded his body and muscles like he knew the more experienced ninja did to enhance themselves to be stronger and faster, and found that not only could he do it unlike before, but he was able to do it to a level he didn't think possible till now. Earlier against the sound ninja he was able to rush forward and punch him without anyone reacting, and he wasn't even really pushing himself. Another thing he noticed was that his eyes didn't turn off like Sasuke's Sharingan. They were always active. The constant input of information was helpful during a fight, and if he were trying to understand a situation as quickly as possible but just sitting around lounging, it was a bit annoying. He actually started closing his eyes when he didn't need them. He found he was still very much aware of the world around him even with them closed. He'd have to think of a better solution because he was sure he looked a bit strange walking around with his eyes closed but still moving as if he could see perfectly. Since the pulse of chakra, people were taking the situation of the exams a bit differently. The Jonin and Anbu were stationed at various places around the tower to monitor for whatever or whoever was responsible. Jiraiya skipped all pretenses of waiting to run into Naruto organically and went to the tower to meet up with the third Hokage to investigate the situation. The Hokage, when he arrived at the tower along with Jiraiya and Kakashi, were pulled aside by Iruka. Iruka stared at what was likely the three most powerful leaf ninja with a serious expression. "It's Naruto," he said seriously. All three of them, who all had different levels of attachment to the boy in question, looked at Iruka with narrowed eyes, hoping it wasn't something bad. Iruka gulped. "That chakra, it was Naruto, he's different. When the prelims start, you'll see. He's in his team's room right now if you want to see him now. Although I think addressing Sasuke Uchiha's curse mark is more pressing." Which is what the three of them did. Thankfully Sasuke was still out cold when they arrived, so they were able to bind the curse mark with a sealing jutsu called the evil sealing method quite easily. Sasuke woke up shortly after, groggy and confused. While more irritable than before, he wasn't too different after getting briefed on where he was in the situation with the seal. Although safe from the effects of the seal at the moment, Sasuke mentioned his chakra was a bit more wild than normal. The three moved on and decided to wait till the next day when the prelims would take place to see the changes in Naruto. Which is where they found themselves, all gaping at the blonde's glowing blue eyes and terrifying chakra that was barely held beneath the surface. The other Jonin, from the leaf or otherwise, were all doing the same. While the blonde in question was chuckling at Sasuke, who in turn glared at him hatefully, which caused him to laugh harder. Hiruzen turned to Jiraiya. "Have you?" "No," the sage answered seriously, "that is not something I've ever seen. If I couldn't feel his chakra, and see that his whiskers are somehow gone, I would assume that he was just pushing a lot of chakra into his eyes for whatever reason and nothing was all that different. But they are different, and the glow is unnatural. Neither Minato nor Kushina had anything remotely similar to that." Kakashi uncovered his Sharingan for a moment to look at the blonde. "I would ask a Hyuga to confirm, but his chakra is calmer than I've ever seen it, and his eyes have a tremendous amount of chakra flowing through them, similar to an activated ocular jutsu, like mine or Sasuke's Sharingan." Hiruzen hummed for a moment as his mind worked at light speed. "We will see what changes have come in the coming moment during his battle. I suspect things are going to be a lot more interesting soon." Kakashi and Jiraiya both agreed. In the far corner, a concealed Orochimaru was staring at Naruto with a gaping mouth in complete shock. "What the?" the snake thought uncharacteristically. A sentiment shared by everyone else in the room that has met the blonde before. "Down with all the genin," Naruto was still enjoying himself by laughing at Sasuke, who was in his normal grumpy attitude. Ya know that evil chakra is sealed off, right? So why are you acting all moody? Sad Sakura's not babying you anymore. He asked with mocking frown. Sasuke continued to glare at the blonde, while Sakura just stared ahead completely over it. Naruto had been poking fun at her and Sasuke ever since they got to the tower, and no matter what either of them did, they couldn't touch Naruto to shut him up. Yelling at him just made him laugh at them. It was a horrible day when the class clown, prankster, suddenly became all-powerful. The third Hokage appeared before the crowd of Chunin hopefuls with a smoking pipe in his mouth and his hands folded behind his back. Congratulations for making it this far, he said gravely. Naruto smiled at the old man, then proceeded to tune out the rest of his speech. He got the gist of it. This was a substitute for war, and they needed to fight for the village. He got it. They were show ponies for the future of their respective villages to potential clients. When they asked if anyone wanted to drop from the exams, the guy with the info cards quit for some reason, even though he wasn't hurt or lacking in chakra. Naruto rolled his eyes, assuming that he was a coward or something. While stronger than practically all of the genin here, the guy still ran off, so Naruto didn't spare him much thought. After that, another monologue started, and Naruto decided to be himself. Ah, old man, we get it. Can we move on? I'm about to pass out here. Naruto whined with his hands in the air in exasperation. The Leaf Jonin forgot about Naruto's new presence for a moment and were reminded that he was in fact an immature idiot. Many took to glaring at both him and Kakashi, who was rubbing his head nervously, as Naruto's disrespect reflected poorly on him. Truly, do you understand? Hiruzen asked in amusement. Duh, ya damn geezer. Naruto answered, getting hisses from many of the Leaf Nin and a small snort from Jiraiya up in the Hokage observation platform. We're show ponies for the old fogies, and there are too many of us for the main event, so you got to weed out some of the weaklings. I swear you take 100 words to say 20. The disrespect was ignored in favor for the surprise that Naruto of all people understood the situation when he was clearly not paying too much attention. Well, very good. A surprised Hiruzen muttered with a nod. I leave it to you. He turned to a sickly-looking Jonin, then moved to his platform with Jiraiya. The man introduced himself as Hayate. If you would all look to the monitor, he said with a small cough. Names began flashing, and after a while it was Sasuke's, and someone named Yoroi. Naruto looked at his teammate's opponent and saw that his chakra seemed to have special properties around his hands. Sasuke, watch out for his hands, he said quietly. Sasuke barely heard it, and before he could ask why, someone else did. Kakashi, who was suddenly leaning down with his head next to Naruto's, added, "Why's that?" He whispered. Naruto fell back in shock. He didn't even know when Kakashi got there. Whoa, how do you do that, Kakashi-sensei? He asked in bewilderment before answering. His chakra, it's got something interesting going on with his hands. He whispered to the two who gazing at the boy in question. Kakashi hummed in interest, so his eyes did have some type of ocular jutsu that allowed him to see chakra. Well, you heard him, Sasuke. Let's get up to the second level, Sakura, Naruto. Kakashi said with an eye smile before walking towards the stairs. Moments later it was just the Uchiha and the strange genin left, and their fight began. Sasuke made quick work of the guy with Naruto's warning and Sharingan enhanced hand-to-hand. Naruto cheered loudly and obnoxiously, "Woo! You did it! You beat that guy!" he shouted, getting glares from some of the others in the room. Kakashi clapped with an eye smile next to the blonde, while Sakura was on the other end of the stands next to Kurenai, pretending she was in Team 8. Fights continued for a while. Naruto made a genuine nuisance of himself by calling out everyone's weaknesses as a joke while they fought, then made both helpful and unhelpful suggestions. Shino, your bugs are really gross. I mean, they're inside that guy's arms. Yeah, they should eat that chakra, it's like an air cannon. Whoa, Choji's extra fat. That sound guy will have an easier target now. Hey Hinata, He's hitting those chakra point things inside you, you should block that. You Hyuga guy, I'll kick your ass. Is he a puppet? Think Bun Bun will notice it's a wind jutsu. These sound ninja are all on brand, huh? I mean genjutsu from a bell. Think they go out of their way to stick to their niche. Oh cool, Shikamaru won. The only ones that were enjoying Naruto's commentary were Kakashi, Hiruzen and Jiraiya. All three who would have been bored out of their minds watching Genin fight. Also, Naruto's observations gave them insight into his eyes' new abilities. Naruto Uzumaki vs. Kiba Inuzuka. Oh, hey, I get Kiba. Naruto said with a cheer. Ha, Akamaru, we get an easy one. Kiba cheered while petting his faithful companion who was laying on the ground refusing to move. Huh, what's wrong? Naruto jumped down to the arena before turning to Kiba, he's scared. He called out happily. Kiba glared at the blonde, as if he probably doesn't want to waste his time with a dead last. No worries, I got this myself. Kiba said arrogantly, not noticing Akamaru was shaking while looking away from Naruto. It was unfortunate that his enhanced senses were primarily in his nose as he didn't quite notice how much Naruto has changed beyond his eyes. To which he thought Naruto was just trying to get more attention. Hayate looked between the two nervously. Well, the blonde made him nervous, not Kiba, then started the fight on the Hokage's signal. Everyone, from the Genin to the Hokage, leaned forward in anticipation. Naruto watched Kiba approach him as if he was in slow motion. He could see every muscle twitch and minuscule detail of the boy's approach and felt like he had hours to respond. A punch from the Inuzuka flew at Naruto at speeds that he would have likely been unable to dodge before his evolution. To everyone's shock and Kiba's horror, Naruto disappeared, then was suddenly behind Kiba looking in the direction of his punch. Who was that aimed at? He taunted lightly. I would advise you start moving a bit quicker or you'll never hit me. He added with a chuckle. Kiba shouted in anger before releasing a barrage of attacks. Each time Naruto would disappear, then blur behind Kiba with a laugh, not even once going on the offensive. In the stands, everyone was shocked at the blonde's new abilities. It was unbelievable how he went from one of the weaker idiots in their generation to this. What the hell? Kurenai muttered in shock. Kiba was a very talented genin. She was confident he was going to have a chance to beat nearly anyone here. Now he was being led around like a child by someone that should have been useless. Kakashi was observing with his Sharingan active. He's supplementing his body with chakra. I don't think a single drop is being wasted. He said lightly, hiding his surprise. Guy was looking down seriously. Lee, he is going to be a tough one to beat. He said lowly to his apprentice who nodded seriously. Neji had his Byakugan active and was watching in shock. When did that blonde moron get a bloodline? His eyes have chakra running through them, similar to how mine or the Uchihas do when our eyes are active. Everyone heard his comment and found their suspicions confirmed. Jiraiya continued to watch closely. The young Hyuga confirmed what Kakashi was saying. We'll have to talk to Naruto after the prelims, sensei. Something changed Naruto, and I'll bet my fortune it has to do with Orochimaru attacking Sasuke in the forest. It was the only thing that made sense after all. Hiruzen nodded. I agree. I'll have Kakashi bring him to us afterwards. Although I'm sure he would have anyway. Sasuke glared as he watched with his Sharingan. I don't get it, that idiot didn't have a bloodline before. He said in shock. Sakura walked over. In the forest while you were both unconscious, Naruto's chakra and body changed. She said with a frown. He was different, or rather his presence was. He's still an idiot, just able to take out an enemy in the blink of an eye with no effort. Kakashi turned to her. Yeah? He asked lightly, although his performance right now led him to believe it. Kakashi was still curious at Naruto's improvements. The sound Genin Zaku, the one Shino fought. She answered. I'm honestly surprised he managed to make it here after that. Naruto hit him harder than anyone I've ever seen. Shino, who was near them watching with his team, spoke up. Then that would explain where the broken ribs that my bugs felt came from. I found it odd he was that injured and still fighting. He commented. Down below, Naruto was having a great time, but found he was getting bored. Hey, I'm gonna attack now, okay? He said to the huffing Inuzuka. Similar to before, Naruto blurred forward and punched Kiba. This time he made sure not to hit him nearly as hard as he did the sound guy from the forest. Though, Kiba was still blasted off his feet and sent rolling back till he hit the wall completely out cold. Naruto frowned as he looked at his fist. Am I that much stronger or is he that weak? He turned to Kakashi. Did I hit him too hard? I expected him to be okay at that level. I didn't even put that much chakra into it. Kakashi answered from the stands with an eye smile. Naruto, there was enough power in that punch to knock out any Chunin I've met. He said with a thumbs up. He didn't mention that some Jonin would likely have been taken out due to the impressive speeds Naruto just showed. Naruto listened to his sensei before turning to Kiba, who was starting to come to. Hey dog breath, you. Oi bronchitis, call it ease finished. He called to the proctor in amusement. Hayate's sweat dropped. Is he referring to me? He looked at Kiba for a moment, who was failing to get to his feet before nodding to himself. Winner Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto whooped, then jumped back up to the stands smiling at his team. That was pretty easy. He laughed with a comical expression on his face. Teammates Sensei Kurenai gave him a side eye at his disrespect, but didn't call him out. Shikamaru, who had been unable to think of anything else since Naruto's awakening in the forest, stepped forward towards Naruto. His personality is the same, so he may answer me here. What's up with your eyes? He asked nonchalantly. Everyone subconsciously leaned forward hoping for answers. Naruto perked up. Oh yeah, I have super awesome eyes now. He said with a grin. Everyone in earshot fell over at his answer. Shikamaru shot up. I get that, you idiot, what's new about them? He shouted, much to his team's shock. Naruto leaned away from the Nara. Whoa, why are you all upset? I mean, I can see way better. Not to mention my chakra control is really good now. Honestly, it's not too big of a deal, I'm as awesome as I've always been. He said with a devilish grin. Shikamaru rubbed his forehead tiredly. I don't know if he's messing with me or just the same old dumbass. Kakashi smiled at the interaction. Interesting. I guess we'll have to talk to him later. At least his ego isn't too much bigger. He thought with a chuckle. Sakura didn't care about her troublesome teammates' weirdness anymore. Meanwhile, Sasuke was staring at Naruto with his Sharingan active, trying to understand him. Stop gazing into my eyes, ya bastard. Shut up, loser. Naruto watched sadly as Sakura and Ino fell to the ground in a spectacular double knockout. The fight was boring, they were moving slower than anyone else so far. The only interesting part came when Ino managed to slam her mind into Sakura. Who would have thought that Sakura has a second personality? Naruto thought cheerfully. Shame that she lost. It would have been nice for all three of us to make it to the finals. But, with a showing like that, maybe it's for the best. Kakashi set Sakura down against the wall with Asuma doing the same next to him with Ino. Team 10 and Team 7 gathered around their unconscious members. Well, not like that wasn't a lame showing. Naruto said simply. He turned to the two Jonin with mock disappointment and pointed to the two girls. That's your fault. I mean, they were so weak they both lost. Kakashi thumped Naruto on the head while Asuma glared at him but didn't say anything. Sasuke looked at Sakura sadly. I expected more from her. She did well to protect us in the forest. He grumbled. Yeah, but that was against the Sound Ninja, and we've seen they're pretty weak. I mean, Shikamaru beat one without throwing a punch. Naruto said, then chuckled. The only remaining Sound Ninja in the room, Dosu, could only glare at Naruto as he was too terrified to say anything in response. Kakashi thumped Naruto again. Don't insult other countries. He chastised. Barely. Naruto, in a lightning blitz of speed that Kakashi wasn't ready for, shot his arm out and thumped Kakashi on the shoulder, since he couldn't reach his head. Stop that. Naruto whined with an overdramatic frown. Kakashi only chuckled while he waved his student off. he really is the same as before, he just has this crazy ability enhancing his skills. He thought lightly. The next fight was Rock Lee versus a guy from the sand, Gaara. Naruto and the others watched as the beginnings of the fight were strictly hand-to-hand, most of which was Lee defending from omnidirectional sand that was protecting Gaara. The sand is filled with chakra, Naruto said with an uncharacteristic seriousness. Kakashi, Guy and the rest turned to him with a frown. Down below, Lee back flipped away then blitzed forward to reengage. Obviously, otherwise he couldn't control the sand, said Sasuke with narrowed eyes, unknowingly saying what was on the Jonin's minds. Naruto shook his head. Yeah, sure, I wouldn't have mentioned it if it was just his chakra. But that sand has two, no three, different chakras in it. Strange, he said with a hum at the end. The Jonin who managed to hear him narrowed their eyes at the information, particularly Kakashi who uncovered his Sharingan. Guy who was next to him leaned over as his rival worked to confirm his student's information. Kakashi covered his eye with a sigh. Whatever he is able to see, it's beyond what I can. To me the sand has chakra in it, that's all. Lee landed on the statue after a series of dodges and Guy, having more insight into Gaara now, decided to allow him to remove his weights. Rock Lee took those words with genuine excitement as he happily revealed weights beneath his leg warmers then quickly held them up after removing them. Gaara merely watched silently, still showing no emotion on his face. Which was ironic considering the tattoo on his forehead of the kanji for love. Naruto smiled at the interaction, not fully understanding the ceremony of the situation. You wouldn't think taking a few weights off would make someone that happy. He wondered. Who knows with those two? Kakashi sighed tiredly, long past trying to figure out Guy's eccentricities that were unfortunately passed on to his student. Everyone watched as the weight fell to the ground, wondering what the big deal was. The sand ninja watching didn't believe it would matter all that much. Till the earth shook from the weights hitting the ground. The reaction from everyone in the room, from Genin to the supervising Jonin, Orochimaru in disguise, Jiraiya, and the third observing up top. They're insane. Naruto shook his head in amusement. I'd love to have a fight with Lee. He's got some incredible strength if he's that fast with those weights and no chakra helping him out. He said lightly. Lee shot off towards Gaara several times quicker than before. Guy cheering him on with all the genin muttering in shock at the speed. Naruto was able to easily follow the fight despite the incredible speed that they were moving at now. Well, Lee was moving at, Gaara seemed just as surprised and unable to follow the green beast as the rest of the genin. After removing his weights, Lee's movements were not only faster but far more precise. Naruto decided to watch him far more closely. The way Lee's muscles would contract for his movements, the placements of his feet, the way his shoulders angled, everything Lee did Naruto soaked up with glee. Now that his brain was processing information hundreds of times faster, he was able to pick apart what was happening in incredible detail. Lee's fighting style revolved around striking very hard and very fast. Naruto knew that his own technique left much to be desired, so he would work to incorporate these movements. At the same time, Gaara was able to maneuver his sand in more widespread ways now that he was directing it with his hands. Naruto was able to see the various types of chakra commingling within the grains as he attacked. What's he doing? His bandages are moving. Naruto wondered aloud, getting Kakashi's head to snap towards him before he watched the fight more closely. True to Naruto's observations, Lee managed to kick Gaara in the chin, launching him into the air, then proceeded to follow up with an impressive series of kicks. Each impact reverberated through the room, getting small flinches from the genin at the powerful display. The bandages wrapped around Gaara, allowing Lee to grab and spin the sand ninja into the hard ground. Naruto tilted his head in wonder while watching the turn of events. He looked over at Kakashi and Guy, who were talking back and forth slowly, then to the genin around the stands watching in anticipation with impressed looks on their faces at Lee's capabilities. Then he decided to ruin it for fun. That was a pretty good substitution by Sand Boy, Naruto said with a devilish smile. Hope Lee isn't hurt too bad by the backlash, since he didn't really accomplish much. The ninja around him looked at him in shock, Team Guy in horror, before turning back to the fight to watch as Lee's attack landed and was revealed to be wasted. How the hell? Muttered Tenten while watching Lee barely dodge the sand due to the pain from the lotus. When? Muttered Neji. Guy was frantic while watching the fight progress. I didn't even see it. He shouted in shock. It was during the kicks. Answered Kakashi with his Sharingan exposed. When you closed your eyes to pray, he switch out in a flash. I would pull him from the fight, Guy. He's in no condition to continue. Guy glared at his rival, but before he could talk, Naruto spoke up lazily. Nah, he's gonna be fine. He's pushing chakra to those inner blockers. Give him a minute or so and he'll have quite the boost. Blockers? Asked Sasuke, not seeing what Naruto was talking about with his Sharingan. They're called gates, the 8 inner gates to be exact. Answered Kakashi while turning his Sharingan enhanced glare to Guy, and you taught how to open them to a genin. You're going to cripple that boy. Guy gave his rival a side eye before focusing back on his struggling student while leaning forward over the railing. His fingers were pushing into the metal railing due to his nervous squeezing. You wouldn't get it, having everything come to you so easily. He said in a low baritone, for the rest of us, we have to claw and crawl for every bit of strength. It's even worse for Lee. Even the most basic ninjutsu and genjutsu is beyond him. His expression turned fond as Lee was slowly getting faster as he was overcoming the backlash of the primary lotus. Lee just wants to prove he's a splendid ninja with his hard work. I only did everything in my power to help him with his dream. He proclaimed proudly. Naruto smiled down at Lee. He was truly impressed with the boy's drive to achieve his dream. Not to mention the evidence of thousands of hours of hard work getting him to where he is now with his lack of ninjutsu or genjutsu. I think he's gotten there already, bushy brow sensei. Naruto interjected lightly. Something I've learned is that ninja don't always improve on a slow curve, it can be a sharp and immediate increase as well. Lee's movements became even sharper than before as his body was acclimating to the 8 gates activation. His eyes flaring with incredible power, and his entire body shining brightly with green chakra. Every movement was perfectly executed and delivered with tremendous force, destroying the fighting arena. Gaara was pushing even more chakra into the sand, trying to keep up with Green Genin's speed, but was being sent flying by a rapid aerial combo. I mean, he's already adapting and improving with every second. I can tell that he's become way better than he was before this fight. If he keeps going as he is, then he'll no doubt become one of the best taijutsu users the Leaf Village has ever seen. Naruto finished with a small smile as his glowing eyes took in every detail. Guy looked down happily, a bit of water popping up in his eyes. Thank you for those words, young Naruto. I'll trust those eyes to see Lee's incredible potential. Naruto laughed in response. Leave it to me, he said with a thumbs up. The rest of the fight was both incredible and terrifying for those watching. Ino and Sakura had woken up just before Lee awakened the gates fully and were enraptured by the boy's skills. Both of them fully realizing that they were way out of their league if those two were potential opponents for them. Lee's explosive use of 5 of the 8 inner gates showed Naruto that there was so much out there that he didn't know. While observing the world with his new eyes that allowed him to begin understanding it better, he was only now realizing that he had a fundamental lack of knowledge to connect the dots. Otherwise, he would be able to put things into words beyond, limit thing, chakra wall thing, different chakras moving all strange. It was just hard to put into words what he instinctively knew. As the fight was reaching a climax, Lee was completely unable to fight and fell to the ground, his body giving out under the stress of the 5th gate. Gaara didn't hesitate and shot his sand at the boy with a bloodthirsty smile on his face. The Jonin, Guy in particular, were about to rush to save Lee, but a blur shot forward first, stopping the sand from even touching Lee. The resulting impact blasted all the sand away, making most turn away from the shockwave. Naruto had shot forward and smacked the sand away with a hand packed with dense chakra. He turned to Lee with a frown. Based on the injuries, it would likely take weeks if not months of rehabilitation to get back into fighting shape. Though it would have been nigh impossible if Gaara was able to crush Lee in his sand like he wanted. Hey sand boy, you won, no need to go that far. Naruto said with a frown while standing guard in front of Lee as he subconsciously released his chakra. Gaara began breathing heavily at Naruto's appearance, his chakra began moving erratically as his instincts flared beyond what he's ever felt. Naruto's presence driving Gaara to near hysteria as the beast within was screaming to flee to save their lives. In the next moment Baki, the sand Jonin who looked visibly nervous, appeared in front of Gaara with his arms spread. Guy and Kakashi also landed in front of Naruto looking serious and bored respectfully. Ah, you guys didn't have to help me out, I would have taken these losers out. Naruto laughed while picking up Lee, his grin became fiendish. I mean that Sandy Jonin over there seems pretty nervous just looking at me. Kakashi sighed tiredly. Please try and not cause an incident with the hidden sand village Naruto. Baki interjected. I think we can end this and move on. Gaara, go back to the stands to Tamari and Kankuro. He ordered, somehow snapping the frantic boy out of it and getting him to leave in a swirl of sand. Huh, that seems to be a very uncomfortable way of travel. Muttered Naruto lightly. Getting sand everywhere would be miserable, he thought. Guy moved to take Lee from Naruto. Thank you for jumping in, Naruto. I was hesitant to interfere, but that was the right call. He said shamefully while holding his nearly crippled student. He knew that had the sand wrapped around Lee it would have been the end of his journey. Kakashi patted his rival on the back before grabbing Naruto to body flicker back to the stands. Try not to interfere again, they may disqualify you. Kakashi chastised lightly. Naruto frowned in frustration at the thought of being disqualified for saving a comrade, which caused his chakra to flare and eyes to glow brighter subconsciously. He didn't even notice it was escaping him. Everyone in the room who wasn't in the clearing during the second test felt the weight of Naruto's chakra in person for the first time. It was very different than an instinctual fear from the flare. Now that they had a front row seat to it, the genin were visibly terrified and unable to move while the Jonin and Hokage became extremely weary. Somehow it was Sakura of all people who smacked Naruto on the back of the head. Stop it, you're scaring everyone, dumbass. She told him tiredly. Her hand was shaking but she managed to hold firm knowing in her heart that he was still the same Naruto for the most part. Naruto's presence instantly went back to normal, and he looked around surprised. Huh? Everyone from Sasuke to the other Jonin sensei were looking at him warily. It was a different look than what he was used to getting as a kid, one of loathing and apprehension. This was just plain fear. He didn't really understand why. He wasn't trying to scare anyone. He turned to the high stands where the Hokage and some other old dude were standing and shot over. He needed to figure out what was going on with everyone's reaction to his chakra, and the old man knew more than most about stuff like this. He was really strong himself. Hiruzen and Jiraiya were able to follow Naruto's approach, but they were blown away by the boy's speed. He was easily on par with skilled Jonin, although his movements weren't exactly skillful. It was due to his masterful chakra control allowing him this speed, not physical skill. Landing on the railing, Naruto looked at the Hokage with a frown, then felt a bit vindictive, which caused his eyes to crinkle in amusement. Hey, old man, is everyone here so lame that I scare them that much? I don't get it. He asked with a whisper shout, making sure everyone could hear him to twist the knife. He found it pretty funny that everyone was so scared of him now. That prankster personality and his normal ego take on a much different tone now that he's this capable. Mused Hiruzen. Had it been anyone else he would squash such things here and now, but Naruto's childhood flashed into his brain, and he felt the blonde probably deserved some respect as recompense. Jiraiya was the one to answer. You may not get it, but your chakra presence is far stronger than most would have ever encountered, much less greenhorns like we have here. He said seriously. He didn't want to mention that the number of people he's felt that scared him more with just their chakra were in fact just two. The third Hokage and Hanzo of the Salamanders. Naruto nodded the information, then turned to Jiraiya. Who the hell are you, ya old man? He questioned comically. Instead of being put off, Jiraiya grinned happily at the question. Who am I, you ask? He shouted while getting into a pose, and he readied his summoning jutsu. Hiruzen interjected. He's a former student of mine, Jiraiya. He answered, making Jiraiya fall over and sulk due to his intro being interrupted. Naruto stared at Jiraiya for several moments, causing both Hiruzen and Jiraiya to look at him curiously. Jiraiya felt like he was being broken down to the smallest details by those eyes and found that he didn't like it one bit. Right as he was about to say something, Naruto turned around. So, he's an old guy like you. Cool, I guess. Your chakra is very interesting, geezer. He said lightly before speeding back over to his team. Jiraiya turned to his sensei with his face serious. I don't know what happened to him, but he's unlike anyone I've ever come across. I didn't sense a speck of the Nine Tails chakra either. It was like it was completely gone from his body. He said while watching Naruto get lightly reprimanded by Kakashi for bothering them. I would like to learn more about his eyes and what he's able to see, but for now let's assume it's unique to him and be thankful he's been given such a gift with those men out there looking for him. Hiruzen said with a puff of his pipe. Not to mention Orochimaru lurking around itching to cause trouble. We may have need of Naruto's newfound strength soon. He'll need some growing up to match his power up before he's all that reliable. Jiraiya said with a snort, getting a laugh out of the Hokage. Ha, he's always been a brat, now he's a brat with terrible power. You saw how fast and strong he was in that match. Hiruzen said lightly. If he were to hammer in the basics of taijutsu, he may become faster and stronger than any of us with just chakra enhancement. We also don't know what he's like when pushing it to the max. I would honestly put him on a level above most in the village shinobi. We need to see his abilities with ninjutsu and genjutsu to really understand, but as of now only the very best would be able to face him and win. It was a crazy thing to say, but Jiraiya believed it after getting a small up-close look at him. Naruto didn't know it, but he was giving off a vibe of supreme confidence, that when mixed with his strength made him all the more fearsome. He supposed that this was why even experienced Jonin like Asuma and Guy were weary around him at the moment. Indeed. Hiruzen agreed. I would have normally allowed you to go about meeting and training him in your own way, but as of now we will be dropping all pretenses. He has awakened a new bloodline that has granted him unknown abilities. After we speak with him, he is to be with you at all times. I do not want Danzo to have time to approach him. That is the last thing anyone needs, and I do not want to hear about it from the other elders that he needs to be trained properly. Jiraiya could only nod silently while he mourned his precious research time in the coming weeks. But even he could understand the gravity of the situation. It wouldn't take long for Naruto's awakened abilities to spread through the village, then the continent. Mix in his now uncanny resemblance to Minato now that his whiskers were gone, thing are gonna change. In his expert spy opinion, Naruto would have the month before everyone in a position of power to have at least heard a rumor about him. In their discussions, Hiruzen and Jiraiya didn't notice that the last of the prelim fights were finished and the winning genin were gathered on the floor again to determine their opponents for the finals. Hayate gestured to a small podium with a box atop it. We're not going to make it complicated, pick a number. Number 1 will fight number 2 and so on. Sasuke Uchiha, please step forward. Sasuke walked up silently and drew his number. Funnily enough, it was number 1. From there it continued. Naruto watched on as it was decided that Puppet Dude would fight Shino. Shikamaru would fight Wind Girl. Dosu the sound guy got the highest number, meaning a free round, and finally he drew his number with a comical expression. He showed it to everyone else. He had been hoping for 2 to fight Sasuke, but he got 3, meaning the Hyuga. But that means, Naruto thought warily while looking to Gaara, who by process of elimination was to be Sasuke's opponent in the first round. He locked eyes with Kakashi, who gave him a reassuring eye smile that only made him worry more. Sasuke could only clench his fists as he stared forward, ignoring everyone. So these are the matchups for the first round of the finals. We need time to allow the dignitaries and Case Cage to arrive, so you have 1 month to train. I would keep everyone in the finals in mind as you prepare. You don't know who you could end up facing should you win. Instructed Hayate to the Chunin hopefuls. With that, the second exam was officially over and everyone began leaving. The supervising Jonin and Chunin left to perform their duties while the sensei gathered their teams to lead them out of the forest towards their designated training areas. Unlike the rest, Kakashi led his team to the Hokage, who then gestured for them to follow him out of the forest to his office in the Hokage Tower. Jiraiya was silently accompanying them while the Hokage's Anbu guards were following from the shadows. Standing in the Hokage's office, Naruto absent-mindedly took in the room as the old people got settled. It was an interesting room if he were honest, not due to the items within the room but the residual chakra that had seeped into the environment. The desk that the old man sat behind was practically glowing from the chakra of 4 of the most powerful people in history having sat behind it. Naruto. The blonde's head shot up at Sakura's shout to notice that everyone in the room was staring at him. He tilted his head in confusion. I wasn't listening, he said plainly. Sasuke and Sakura shook their heads in embarrassment. Their teammate was as annoying as always while Kakashi laughed awkwardly from his spot on the wall. Naruto, I asked what you can tell me about your eyes. The Hokage asked again while staring directly into Naruto's new eyes. Naruto pursed his lips in thought. Well, I'm able to see chakra, ya know. But that is a way too simple way to say it. It's like I can truly understand chakra and its place in the world. He explained lightly with a shrug. Kakashi latched onto that. What do you mean, its place in the world? He questioned. Well, it's like the difference in knowing that salt is in ramen and knowing why and how much salt would make ramen taste the best, answered Naruto. While a strange way to explain it, the Hokage and Kakashi actually understood what he was getting at. Jiraiya looked like he understood and smirked in amusement at the way he tried to explain it. Sasuke and Sakura weren't even surprised that ramen came into the conversation, so they just accepted it and moved on. If I'm really honest, I'm able to fully understand what I look at, but I'm having trouble putting it into words. Like the desk you're at, old man, it was created by water and earth chakra bound together by yang chakra. Naruto continued while pointing to the desk. Then there is the faint traces, almost impossible for me to see, of the same chakra that exists naturally in the world around us flowing through the wood. I guess since old man first had the ability of wood style, that's where it came from. He really must have been incredible. Everyone was spellbound at the insight Naruto was given by his eyes, most particularly Jiraiya, who had experience with teaching a person with tremendous eye powers. These abilities aren't too dissimilar from the Rinnegan that Nagato possessed. He too was able to perceive and understand chakra. There is a test to see just how similar, he thought before moving over to Kakashi. I need chakra paper. I know someone eclectic as you would carry some around. Kakashi didn't really get why, but he handed the small stack of chakra papers he had over to Jiraiya. The sage moved over to the 3 genin and handed one to each of them. Sakura, if you would be so kind, please push chakra into that paper. Jiraiya instructed the girl, who did so curiously. A moment later and the paper crumbled into dust. An affinity to earth jutsu, very nice, something you and I share. Sasuke, please. He gestured to the Uchiha, who looked at his paper intensely. After a moment, instead of bursting into flame, his paper crinkled. Huh. Kakashi mused from the wall. Interesting. Sasuke looked down in melancholy. It would explain his issues with using the fireball jutsu in his younger years when learning from his father. Seems he just wasn't as inclined to fire as the rest of his clan, as much as him, and that made him look lesser to his father at the time. Lightning, interesting for an Uchiha, but with your teacher it may be a blessing, mentioned Jiraiya with a thumb pointed to Kakashi. Then he turned to Naruto. The real reason he asked for the papers, the Rinnegan gave the user completely malleable chakra able to utilize all 5 elements as if each were the primary affinity. He and everyone looked at Naruto as he held up his paper. After a second, Naruto grinned fiercely and the paper began to glow a subtle blue. He turned his head to look over at Jiraiya and waved the paper happily. Ha! I broke your little test. Jiraiya felt his body weaken at the unique reaction. Never in his life had he seen something like that. No one had no affinity. Nagato's paper had a reaction of all the elements at the same time before turning into a strange black metal. Kakashi revealed his Sharingan to look at the paper and Hiruzen was frowning as he looked on, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. Just kidding, laughed Naruto, and in the next moment the paper sliced in half. Wind, muttered Jiraiya in shock, then he glared at Naruto. What did you do, brat? He demanded, as that earlier reaction to his chakra wasn't natural. Naruto threw the scraps away with a shrug. Oh, well, I was watching when Sasuke and Sakura used their paper and noticed what was happening. The paper is so sensitive that even the faintest trace of elemental chakra cause a reaction, yeah. So I removed any and all elemental traces from my chakra. He explained happily with a grin and an amused glint in his glowing eyes. Kakashi felt himself get a bit lightheaded. The level of control needed, he said in astonishment. The Hokage was feeling similar to Kakashi. He grabbed a chakra paper and tried to do the same. After several moments, when he felt he may have succeeded, the paper burst into flames, showing his fire affinity. Not even I could do it, he hummed. Jiraiya didn't bother trying himself. If Sensei couldn't do it, then no one alive could do it. Maybe Tsunade, as she is intimately familiar with her chakra and she never spent much time learning elemental jutsu. But that's beside the point. Both she and Sensei have literal decades dedicated to learning and perfecting their chakra control. Naruto did it on a whim to mess with me. I think I'm understanding just what he's capable of now. Last test and this will seal it. The sage walked up to Naruto, who looked up at him curiously. Everyone in the room watching curiously. Do this, Jiraiya demanded as he held up his palm and created a perfect Rasengan. Hiruzen and Kakashi connected the dots and felt sweat build on their heads at Jiraiya's implication with this test. If Naruto succeeded, then that would mean he had literally infinite potential with chakra, internally and externally. Naruto stared at the orb and felt himself be drawn in almost hypnotically. It was incredibly dense and was made up of hundreds of streams of rotating chakra. The orb was completely self-sustaining and would likely pack quite the punch on whoever was so unfortunate to be on the receiving end. He could tell this would be an incredibly difficult jutsu to learn. It just required too much to focus on and control to create, likely taking months of practice to get it to the level of being usable in battle. Whoever designed such a jutsu was on a whole other level in terms of smarts and ingenuity. Yeah, give me a second. Naruto cupped his hands and focused hard, looking directly at the jutsu, then back to his hands. After a moment it started to form. It was slow and sloppy, barely held the proper form at first, as wisps of chakra were leaking out of it at first. It was slow, taking well over a minute to create, but after a moment it was done. Naruto extended his hand right next to Jiraiya's and the two orbs of destructive chakra danced next to each other almost identically save for color. Jiraiya's held a small faintest tinge of red at the outermost layer as his natural chakra color made itself known. While the other, Naruto's, was a deep blue with a white core similar to his eyes in color. That's, Kakashi exclaimed in shock. He couldn't even put it into words. The Hokage had long since put his smoking pipe down lest he drop it on his stack of papers. Neither could form into words the implications of what they were looking at. Sasuke had his Sharingan active and was unable to copy the jutsu. Sakura frowned as she watched. She recognized the Rasengan from the textbooks and knew just how absurd the feat Naruto just accomplished was. Naruto drained the chakra from the orb and put his hand back down. I think that was the perfect jutsu for me. I've got some interesting ideas from it, he said happily. He never considered chakra manipulation like that, which made him think he was thinking too small on what he should start learning for jutsu. Jiraiya let go of the orb and rubbed his eyes. Naruto, You didn't copy it similar to the Sharingan, did you? To me, it seems as if you just instinctively know how to use chakra at near perfect levels. That and your ability to see and comprehend chakra was what enabled you to create a Rasengan after just learning of the jutsu. Correct? He asked, already suspecting it to be the truth. Pretty much, yeah, Naruto said happily. You know, you're making it easier for me to understand these eyes. I know what they can do, but I don't really get it. But I'm getting it now. Hiruzen latched onto that with a smirk. You were a truly terrible academy student, Naruto. He said, lightly, getting snorts from Sasuke and Sakura, who knew firsthand how true that was. I believe you both know the best path forward for Naruto's training. He asked towards Jiraiya and Kakashi. Both of them nodded with a small snort of amusement. Oh yeah? Asked Naruto. What's that? Kakashi walked forward and patted Naruto on the head. You need to study. You have a fundamental lack of knowledge which is impacting your understanding of your newfound awareness thanks to those eyes. Speaking of which, we'll have to name them. It's a new bloodline after all. I don't know, Kakashi. You know who had the worst naming sense I've ever known, and if Naruto is anything. Jiraiya laughed, but he was interrupted by Naruto, who was staring past everyone out the window behind the Hokage's desk with a serious expression on his face. The six eyes, he declared, causing a shiver to some in the room. In my heart, I know that they are called the six eyes. I figured that would be the case, mused Hiruzen. Similar to other bloodlines that could be named one thing or the other, there is always the true name that people who awaken them instinctively know. Lava style rather than magma is one, boil style and steam style both being their own branches. Everything has a true name, and it would seem that the six eyes are no different. Very well. Then Naruto will heretofore be known as the first user of the six eyes bloodline, declared the Hokage, settling the issue. That being said, news will spread on its own due to Chunin exams, but until that is the case, I urge everyone not to mention them to anyone that doesn't already know about them, much less their abilities. Sasuke, you understand the danger of being one of the only users of an ocular jutsu. Sasuke frowned and gave the Hokage a nod in affirmation. When he was younger, he always had an Anbu shadow for the sole reason of protecting him from kidnappers and thieves. Security was tight for people like him ever since the Cloud incident with the Hyuga. Naruto laughed and waved a hand. Ah, don't worry about that, I'm plenty strong enough to take care of some small fry going for my eyes. Please, spread word of my awesome abilities, he demanded with a devilish grin and arms spread. He got dead eyes from his teammates in response, making him sweat drop. While Jiraiya and Kakashi just ignored him. That concludes everything I wanted to go over, Hiruzen announced, subtly hinting for them to leave. Ah, I had a question, Naruto said simply with a hand raised. What are we gonna do about the snake girl? She was the one to mark Sasuke with the evil mark that's actively trying to poison him. Jiraiya stepped forward and whacked Naruto on the head lightly. Leave that to us. That girl was in fact my old teammate in disguise, Orochimaru, who's perhaps the most dangerous traitor the Leaf has. I bet I could beat him now, Naruto responded without acknowledging the smack. Speed, strength and a Rasengan won't be enough to do that, and we don't want him going for your eyes, responded Jiraiya seriously, now starting to understand how deep Naruto's ego ran. Naruto shrugged without care. Pretty sure the fourth became feared above all others with those three things, but whatever, I'll step in if it gets bad, he declared before turning around leaving the office. The rest of the room watched him leave dumbly. Sasuke and Sakura decided to follow his lead after bowing to the Hokage. After the three genin were gone, Kakashi turned to the Hokage and Jiraiya seriously. How could this have happened? He asked, voicing the thoughts of the other two without knowing. Jiraiya shook his head. No idea, there's never been a concrete reason for bloodlines existing. The Byakugan and Sharingan have been around for thousands of years, so their origin is nearly unknown. The first Hokage's wood style was said to be a mutation unique to him as a result of his titanic life force and the Senju family's affinity to earth and water. Hiruzen stood and looked over to the pictures on the wall, particularly of the fourth Hokage. Naruto hails from a very esteemed bloodline in Kushina, the only daughter of the Uzumaki clan's main bloodline in that generation, and was a distant cousin to Mito, who hailed from the same family. Both were born with powerful chakra that allowed them to subdue even the Nine Tails. But that isn't the only family Naruto was born from. Are you suggesting that Sensei's family had the 6 eyes? Kakashi questioned incredulously. No, that's not possible. Jiraiya said with a shake of his head. Hiruzen raised his hand to stop them. No, not in the way you're both thinking. First, we know nothing of Minato's family. He was an orphan from the Second War as far as we were able to trace. No, I mean that Minato was always able to understand things quickly, and for a person without the Sharingan he was able to perfectly move and react at immense speeds. It could be that his unique natural talents and Kushina's immense chakra power merged into what has been born into the 6 eyes that Naruto has awakened. We also shouldn't completely ignore the presence of the 9 tails in both Kushina and Naruto. The third Hokage sat into his chair tiredly. At the end of the day, mutations becoming bloodlines is something no one really understands. Orochimaru drove himself insane trying to understand the world because of things like this. He sighed. At the end of the day, the how doesn't exactly matter. Jiraiya said with a sigh, what's left is to see where Naruto goes from here. We don't have to worry about his potential anymore. I don't think anyone has been born with more than him. Kakashi nodded. Agreed, with all this taken care of, I'm going to be taking Sasuke to train for the month. He needs to be ready for Gaara, he said before leaving the office. The room was silent for a moment before Jiraiya spoke. It could be him, sensei. Jiraiya said full of melancholy. The child of prophecy, Nagato was killed as was Minato. Perhaps it is Naruto who has the best of both worlds. Powerful eyes, immense power, and Minato and Kushina's spirit. Hiruzen gazed at his former student fondly. Perhaps you are correct. Good luck with him, he added lightly. 1 month later, Chunin exams arena. Naruto walked through the tunnel leading to the open area where the finals would take place. In the last month, it wouldn't be small to say that he had changed in incredible ways. He, at the demands of Jiraiya and the Hokage, was forced to speed every morning, pouring through textbooks that he pointedly ignored during his time in the academy. Though a benefit they learned of the 6 eyes was increased processing power for his brain, with that he finished his required readings after the 2nd week. From that, it was just practicing taijutsu maneuvers to get his body up to the required level of a Chunin. By Jiraiya's estimate, he had the raw skill of an experienced genin rather than a Chunin hopeful like he was expected to have. Again, with practice and training, he mastered the Leaf Village's basic forms, Jiraiya's personal advanced steps, and several grappling techniques that he found interesting. Without chakra enhancement and his eyes closed, he was at a solid Chunin level in raw skill, which was a drastic increase. Naruto smiled as he looked around. While not completely off, with these glasses on he was able to limit the amount of input his eyes gave him. This way he could do things like eat dinner, walk around the village, and water his garden without the constant stream of information his eyes allowed. It didn't tire him out or cause him headaches or anything, just a bit annoying sometimes when he just wants to relax and enjoy his ramen. In addition to his sparkling blue glasses that mirrored the color of his eyes, he changed up his outfit as the colors and style clashed something fierce. Instead, he opted for a slightly oversized black, almost blue-tinted jumper, over a black shirt with similar pants. The shins weren't taped down like most, as he didn't mind the bagginess, then typical shinobi sandals to round it out. In Jiraiya's own words, he didn't look like a moron anymore, which actually meant he looked good. That was something he learned about Jiraiya as well. The guy was a right taskmaster and refused to hand out even the slightest compliment. It was so bad that Naruto had to compliment himself during training to combat this. Jiraiya seemed to be flustered by this as he would scowl in the direction of the forest sometimes. All in all, if Naruto were to be completely honest, he didn't think anyone in the village would be much of a challenge anymore. He had, thanks to learning the Rasengan, devised a couple of interesting techniques that bolstered his already incredible ability to insane heights. Reaching the end of the tunnel, he noticed that other than Sasuke and that sound guy with the bandages, he was the last to arrive. Everyone turned to him and had various reactions to his new appearance. Most were just curious at the change. Naruto grimaced a bit but didn't say anything. The guy with the cough was gone and now it was someone else. "Hey, oral fixation, where's bronchitis?" he asked, interrupting everyone from their thoughts. Most of the genin sweat dropped at his lack of respect while Genma felt his eye twitch. "Things change, I'm the proctor today. Also, don't call me that. My name is Genma." Sure, strange guy." Naruto waved him off and stood to the side smiling at his to-be opponent Neji Hyuga. After a bit, Genma touched his hair and nodded. "Got it," he said lightly. "Slight change of the order. Sasuke is running late, so his fight is to be pushed to the last of the first round. Neji and Naruto, you're up." Genma then announced the same loudly for the crowd, who had various reactions to the news of the last Uchiha. Sakura sat down with a worried frown on her face. This was the out of character for Sasuke, although very in character for her sensei. She really hoped that it was his fault they were late and not that the tardiness was rubbing off on Sasuke. She looked down at the crowd of genin and felt a slight longing to be a part of the group fighting for promotion. In the last month she had been training very hard, with Naruto of all people, or she assumed it was him and not a clone. She was learning the basic form of chakra enhancement from him, as well as how to convert her chakra into earth-natured chakra. Jiraiya, who was training Naruto, even gave her some pointers and jutsu scrolls with low-level beginner elemental jutsu for the earth style. That, mixed with her daily dedication to physical conditioning, put her several levels above where she was at the start of the exams. She actually felt like she could have competed now. If only Kakashi had taken the time to train her like this prior to the exams. "Where's Sasuke?" asked Ino as she sat next to her. Sakura observed her rival and felt that she wasn't the only one who busted their ass training in the last month. Her chakra felt different, and she held herself with far more poise than before. "No idea, I'm sure it's Kakashi-sensei's fault. He couldn't arrive on time without a blade to his throat," she complained with a sigh. A booming laugh came from behind her. Team Guy sans Neji were all seated there to watch the finals. "My eternal rival is always so hip and cool, he never arrives on time," he gushed and complained at the same time somehow. Lee was fired up at his mentor's words while Tenten just sighed with an amused smile at the usual antics of her team. "Yosh! With that announcement, it's going to be Neji's turn," proclaimed Lee with excitement. Tenten turned to Lee. "You think he has a chance against Naruto Uzumaki?" she asked. "If he continues to fight with the flames of youth that Guy Sensei taught us, then he will have a great showing," Lee said with a raised fist, his movements a bit sluggish as he was still feeling the effects of the gate. Guy looked down as the genin not fighting were sent to their own observation area, leaving only Naruto and Neji with Genma on the field. He was confident that in raw fighting capability there weren't any genin and few Chunin that Neji wouldn't be able beat after the month of training he just put the team through. But he's keenly aware that Naruto Uzumaki wasn't a normal person anymore. Just the way the blonde was standing there, a picture of supreme confidence. His showing against Kiba, the flare of chakra during the second exam, and his insight he showed during the prelims led Guy to believe that Naruto was more akin to a Jonin than Chunin. He just hoped that Neji was able to show his ability in the fight. He was confident in all three of his students' abilities, but he was also realistic. Naruto stood across from Neji with a smile, his glasses twinkling in the sunlight. Neji seemed serious and ready to fight. He wasn't planning on smashing him right away, as that wouldn't be very sporting. So he would play defense at the start and let the Hyuga dictate the pace. "Begin." The crowd roared in excitement as the finals were started. Neji wasted no time and activated his Byakugan, veins bulging around his eyes as the bloodline flared to life. Naruto looked over his glasses at the activation curiously. The way the chakra coalesced around his eyes and brain from the Byakugan was quite interesting. He wanted to continue looking at them, but the fight started, meaning he should pay attention to Neji. Oh well, time to get to it. Neji's chakra flared throughout his body, and he shot forward with great speed. His movements honed even further than they were a month ago under the tutelage of his sensei Guy, and his control over his chakra internally channeled far better than ever before. As soon as he was within range, he jabbed forward with a palm thrust that Naruto leaned away from. Another was similarly avoided. Every time an attack would come, Naruto would dance around it with minimal wasted movement. Neji started to flood his body with even more chakra, more than he could readily control. It gave him a bigger boost, but he was being drained even quicker due to the leakage. Naruto felt he'd shown his ability to move well enough and decided to respond. Neji's palm thrust was caught by Naruto's palm, who then pulled Neji off balance and slammed a ruthless fist into his face, knocking him into the air. Naruto, who was still holding his hand from the palm thrust, yanked his arm, causing him to spin midair but not fly further away. Quickly, Naruto spun in place and landed a devastating kick on Neji that sent him tumbling away till he stopped on the ground, wincing from the pain. Naruto started to limber up in place as he waited for Neji to pull himself together and reengage him. Neji got to his feet and continued the fight. Hiyashi Hyuga watched the battle between his nephew and the blonde Uzumaki with a fierce glare on his face, which wasn't really out of place for him. He didn't like the way his incredibly talented nephew was being treated like an unskilled child in front of the whole village and foreign contingent. That being said, he wasn't all that surprised. He and the other clan heads were made aware of the new situation with Naruto about a week ago, when the questions regarding the chakra pulse during the exams made the Hokage finally make them aware of what happened. He and several of the others had demanded Naruto's presence to see for themselves, but the messenger shinobi was denied by the blonde, and when he was sent back, was sent packing by the boy all the way to the infirmary. All they got out of the Hokage was that Naruto's new bloodline, the Six Eyes, were a terribly powerful ocular jutsu that would give anyone a run for their money. Next to Hiyashi, his youngest daughter looked him with a frown, her Byakugan active to better see the fight. "Father, why does that boy Naruto possess an ocular jutsu? His clan's name is Uzumaki, and they aren't known for such things," she asked. Hiyashi could only spare her a glance. He recently awakened the genetic mutation that has been called the Six Eyes. No one is really sure where they came from, but such is the case with new bloodlines. Hanabi didn't really know anything about new bloodlines, but was a bit hesitant to ask more of her father while he was so focused on the match. She wished her big sister was here. She would have explained it and answered all of her questions. Sakura couldn't really say she was all that surprised by the turn of events. Naruto had honestly been faster in the forest. Not to mention, she knew that he was improving his overall skills at taijutsu, which in turn made him drastically better overall. Also, she was intimately familiar with his improvement of raw skill, as she was his sparring partner during the month. Lee, on the other hand, was cheering his head off for Neji, likely feeling kinship with the Hyuga now that he was the underdog against a bloodline user. "You can do it, Neji. Let the power of hard work and youth explode," cheered Lee with tears falling from his eyes. Everyone in the stands looked at him with blank expressions before turning to Guy, hoping he would rein in his genin. "Yes, let the springtime of youth explode, Neji," cheered Guy, who was also crying. "What did I expect?" were the collective thoughts of everyone in the audience. Naruto was genuinely enjoying himself as he slapped away Neji's latest attack. His movements were impressive. Unfortunately, the fight had been going for a while and Neji hadn't really landed any attacks, so he knew that the crowd was getting bored. As Neji tumbled back, he felt frustration overtake his calm. When he looked up to his opponent instead of Naruto passively standing around waiting for him to attack once again, he saw the blonde moving towards him at frightening speeds. Knowing that he had no other option, Neji flared his chakra and began spinning quickly. Utilizing one of the Hyuga's prized jutsu, rotation. A large spinning dome of chakra burst into life, forming a nigh impenetrable barrier around Neji, the Hyuga's ultimate defense. Naruto's eyes widened and his face lit up with a savage grin at the challenge. He burst forward at speeds that only a select few watching could see and appeared above the spinning dome with his right hand hovering over the dome. To those who knew anything about the jutsu rotation, they knew that the only way to overcome it was to back off till it was finished, which was usually a couple seconds. For Naruto, he felt a more amusing way to overcome it would be to overtake the power of the rotation and cancel it out with ruthless efficiency. The amount of power and precision to do such a thing was likely only possible for him, but he didn't care since he is him. Neji, who was mid-spin, felt his whole body come to a complete stop and his body rattle from the rapid deceleration. His Byakugan was the only reason he wasn't completely disoriented and knew what had just happened. Naruto overcame his clan's perfect defense, something that quite literally has never happened. Knowing that he needed to get away, he rolled and got to his feet, then hopped further away to gain distance. Naruto watched his opponent back away lazily. Might as well show off a ranged attack. I know I need to prove a wide range of abilities to get promoted. I certainly didn't have a good showing in the first part with that written test. Thanks to the Rasengan, Naruto's idea of what was a potential jutsu was expanded and he had a whole month to experiment. For someone who could get the Rasengan down in a few minutes, that was plenty of time to try a variety of things. Thanks to Naruto's study into chakra and all sorts of theoretical chakra mechanics over the month, he learned all sort of things. It is said that the tailed beast bomb, their strongest attack, is formed by a perfect ratio of positive and negative chakra hyper-condensed together. Yeah. Not exactly helpful outside of academic research for most, as it was practically impossible to separate chakra at that level for normal people. But Naruto has already proven he wasn't normal. Naruto raised a finger and a smile slowly spread across his face. By molding my chakra and forming it with primarily positive chakra, compacting it and coalescing it into a compact ball, I can make something quite powerful. Surrounding the compacted orb of positive chakra with a shell of negative chakra to hold it together, further building the volatility. The reaction is quite something. Naruto thought as a small glowing orb of blood-red chakra was gathered on the tip of his finger. It gave off an eerie glow even in the harsh sunlight. Chakra enhancement jutsu. Red. Naruto intoned as the orb cracked and the power burst forth towards Neji. The shockwave from the attack was so powerful that those in the crowd were unable to move in their seats as the force pushed them further into the chairs. Genma flashed away from the arena to a position behind Naruto to escape, while Neji, who was the target of the attack, could only try and use rotation with all his power. "Father!" shouted Hanabi in shock as she tried to cover her face from the wind. She had been on the edge of her seat as her cousin was mercilessly beaten down by the blonde. Now she was actually scared for herself. Hiyashi grit his teeth tightly, in both anger and fear, as his Byakugan showed him just how terrible this attack from Naruto was and how close it came to obliterating Neji. It was only thanks to Neji pushing every drop of chakra into a desperate rotation that he was still alive and not a stain on the arena wall. He felt even more anger when he saw the clear amusement on Naruto's face as he lazily watched the fallout from his attack. It was bad enough that the brat effortlessly overcame their rotation in the first place. Now he was displaying jutsu strong enough to be classified as A class on a whim. That boy was no genin. "It's over, no one is injured." Hanabi, settle down, he commanded. Sakura had thought she couldn't be surprised by Naruto anymore, but then he blew up half the arena and she had to shield herself from the debris as dust and dirt flew everywhere. Next to her, Ino, Choji, Kiba and Hinata were doing the same. Guy grimaced as he watched the jutsu die down. Next to him, Lee and Tenten shouted in worry for Neji. He'd never seen that jutsu before nor anything really like it, so he'd assumed that it was either an ability granted to him by his eyes, or he created it himself with the help of his eyes. Likely an A- class jutsu in pure destructive capability as well as chakra consumption. If he weren't so confident in Neji's rotation, he too would have feared for his student's life. Just what was Naruto thinking firing something of that magnitude off at a comrade? Wow, that was way stronger than I was expecting. Laughed Naruto as he stared at the fallout of the jutsu. There was a large trench gouged into the earth in front of him all the way to the wall. The leaves on all the trees in the direction of the attack were blasted off and all the grass was torn up. In front of the wall, Neji was heavily panting inside a small circle where his rotation protected him from the blast. The wall itself had a large crater at the center with a large web of cracks spreading out dozens of meters. I didn't put my all into that, I could have made it much stronger. If I were to estimate, I'd say that was about 40% of the power I could safely put into red at this moment. I had a feeling that Neji would have been able to block that much with the remaining chakra in his system and his skill with rotation. Hopefully we both look good enough to pass with that. Naruto pushed his glasses back into place and walked over to Neji with a happy little skip. Neji, that was a good fight, but I win. He declared with a grin and a thumbs up. Hey. Oral fixation, call the match, he's out of juice. Naruto yelled to Genma, who had been following behind him towards Neji. His eye twitched at the name, but he didn't disagree with the blonde and called the match in his favor. Naruto soaked up the attention of the crowd, feeling all sorts of things from all the people watching. Such as admiration, excitement, unease, and fear. But what won out was excitement as they roared with approval at the match they just got to watch. Instead of going to where the rest of the competitors were, Naruto shot up to the roof of the left building that overlooked the Chunin exams arena. The rightmost building was where the dignitaries sat, as it was the one with the most shade from the sun. The center were where the Hokage and Kazekage sat with their guard, and the left building were where everyone else sat. On the roof of the left building, sitting by himself, was Jiraiya sipping on a bit of sake as he lounged under an umbrella to shade himself from the harsh sun. He acknowledged Naruto with a nod. Old man Jiraiya greeted Naruto with a grin. What did you think? I tried to make it look as good as possible for both of us to get promoted. Jiraiya hummed as he poured more sake into a saucer. I think you may have drawn it out a bit too long, but no one will hold that against you for making it more of a show in this context. After all, excitement equals more business for the village. He explained, then took another sip of sake. I would say that both of you have a very good chance of promotion. Neji didn't get to show off much strategy since he couldn't really do all that much against you. Again, I don't think Sensei will hold it against him. I made him very aware of how strong you are. Naruto chuckled hearing that and leaned back onto his elbows next to Jiraiya. Oh yeah? Naruto asked lightly. He'd be very curious about that conversation. Jiraiya flicked Naruto on the head. I'm not adding to that ego by telling you that. You think well enough of yourself already, brat, he said with a twitching eye. Jiraiya's attention was drawn back to the arena floor. I believe even within the first few moments of this match the Nara has shown strategic thinking on par with any Chunin. He'll most likely be promoted, Jiraiya said with an impressed look on his face. Naruto gazed down at the match. The Wind Girl was pretty good and Shikamaru was managing to stay a couple steps ahead, keeping him in the fight despite his lack of offensive power. His shadow manipulation could be far better, Naruto commented lightly while looking at the shadow stretching across the ground speeding towards the Wind Girl. He has a far better grasp on it than his ability would suggest. It's like he's putting barely any effort into commanding the shadow. Then he tilted his head thoughtfully. You know what? That's pretty on brand for Shikamaru now that I'm thinking about it. Jiraiya snorted in amusement. Yeah, he's the Jonin commander Shikaku's son. That man wouldn't get out of bed if his wife wasn't there to nag him, he said with a laugh. Not surprised his son has a general lack of urgency at this age. Shikamaru's dad is that important, huh? Naruto said in wonder. He was aware that his father was the clan head of the Nara clan, but he didn't know he also held a position of importance of that level. Yeah, Shikaku Nara, he's one of the most brilliant minds to ever grace the village. In terms of pure strategic thinking, he's likely the best, responded Jiraiya. Naruto turned to him curiously. Even better than old man Hokage, you and Kakashi-sensei. Jiraiya barked out a laugh. Me? I'm no strategist. I wouldn't call myself dumb, but I'm more of a solo act and can adapt better than most to a variety of circumstances, but commanding others isn't really my forte. Kakashi is an excellent mission leader, but he's never had to effectively lead more than a handful of shinobi. I would say Sensei is a close second with an elder by the name of Danzo in third. Both of them have experience leading large numbers effectively and winning battles without having to be there in person. That's what it means to be a true strategist, using what's available to you to achieve the best outcome without having to be there. Naruto hummed in thought, then I'm not much of a strategist. He mused simply. Jiraiya shook his head, you and I are similar in that regard, we're solo acts. Able to adapt to any situation and come out favorably, but not really suited to leading great numbers without being in the front. He replied. Down below gasps were heard as Shikamaru had effectively ensnared the Wind Girl with his shadow, capturing her and securing the victory. Naruto fell over laughing when instead of accepting the win he decided to forfeit, saying he was out of chakra. He's still got plenty, laughed Naruto. Jiraiya started laughing after hearing that, then he just didn't want to compete anymore, just like his father. It would seem that the puppet guy had forfeited his match to Shino, which is why Shikamaru was the one to fight just now. That meant that next up was Sasuke and Gaara, to which the former still wasn't here yet. Naruto frowned at that, wondering why Kakashi and Sasuke would be so late to arrive to something this important. Jiraiya looked to the sky with a sigh. While we're waiting, I should tell you something. That Gaara, he's like you. He holds the one-tailed beast within him. I was able to confirm it during our month of training. Why tell me? Asked Naruto with a frown. Jiraiya sighed. Just in case things go south with this match, I want you to know what's really going on. I believed it was a bloodline similar to the fourth cage that allowed him to manipulate sand, but it's a byproduct of having the demon sealed within him. And all I got from the 9 tails was the hatred and fear of my countrymen. Naruto commented lightly, hiding just how much it still stung thinking back to his childhood. Jiraiya just looked away, not wanting to respond to that. Down below, the crowd was growing restless at having to wait for Sasuke to show up for the exams to continue. Naruto frowned as a thought occurred to him. His brain processing information is speeds unrivaled by anyone thanks to the 6 eyes. Why do you think Puppet Guy surrendered without a fight? Naruto asked suddenly. It doesn't make sense, right? Sure, it's not a terribly great matchup for him, but he's still trying to be promoted here. Jiraiya looked over at him with a frown. Who knows, I've long given up trying to understand greenhorns. He said offhandedly. Naruto sat forward and leaned over his crisscrossed legs with a frown. Or, would it make sense to not want to show off his puppets in front of so many people? He mused. Exactly, he likely doesn't want to show his hand to everyone here. Replied Jiraiya with a disinterested hand wave. Naruto rubbed his chin in thought. I suppose, but do you think he has some sort of ulterior motive for the exam? Wondered Naruto. The puppet kid? Jiraiya asked incredulously while pointing in the direction of said person lamely. Naruto glared at him. I see what you mean, you really aren't a great strategist, no. I mean the sand ninja, he is one of them if you haven't noticed. Naruto explained with an eye roll. Jiraiya frowned and turned his attention to his sensei as he sat speaking to the cage in their booth. There wasn't much to how they were interacting, and the cage had his face coverings on, so he wasn't really sure what was going on. Though he doubted it was much fun over there. Rasa isn't the type to wage war with the only ally he has. He said lowly, his tone becoming thoughtful. I don't think the Sand Village is in any place to wage war, they aren't exactly at full power these days. Naruto shrugged. If there was one thing he was still pretty ignorant about, it was the current situation of the world at large. His last month of learning helped him with the general information but not the latest stuff. With that in mind, he decided to defer to Jiraiya and lean back on his elbows. Still pretty odd, ya know. Genma was at the end of his rope. Between the constant stream of displeasure aimed at him from the crowd and the arguing from the shinobi side on whether or not to disqualify Sasuke Uchiha or not, he was about to decide himself and take the punishment. Somehow, as the face to the finals to the crowd, he was getting the feeling that they thought he was the person at fault here. Gaara was already standing at the ready. His gourd full of sand was already open, and around him was a thin wispy cloud of sand that didn't really justify the danger of the boy's jutsu. He hoped that whoever faced him was up to the challenge, or they just had Naruto fight him, would likely settle it without much issue. Genma, we have given him as much time as possible, you may move on. Genma sighed as orders from up top came into his earpiece. Seems even the last Uchiha didn't have an infinitely long rope. Right as he was about to speak, a burst of smoke exploded next to him. The crowd gasped while he rolled his eye. This had Kakashi written all over it. The smoke cleared to show Kakashi standing in the same laid-back manner while Sasuke was clearly ready to fight. Curiously, Sasuke's attire had changed into an all-black jumpsuit with white bandages around his left arm. Maybe Team 7 had a joint shopping trip to get new looks. I really hope we're not too late. Kakashi asked worriedly with a nervous smile. Sasuke next to him bristled but didn't talk. Genma shook his head with an amused smile. Right on time, I was about to disqualify you. He replied. The usually stoic Uchiha had a small smile on his face hearing he was still in it. Before anyone could add anything else, Naruto appeared next to them with a wave. Yo, you're late, ya bastard. Laughed Naruto as he moved forward. I was sure that Kakashi-sensei's lateness rubbed off on you. The man in question let out an awkward chuckle while he rubbed his neck. Sasuke stared at him for a moment then smirked. You won right. Of course. Good. I'm excited to fight you. Kakashi walked forward and patted Naruto on the head. Interesting new look, Naruto. Congratulations on winning, although I can't say I'm surprised. He said offhandedly. Naruto smiled at his sensei before turning over to Gaara. Hey. Sand boy, I hope you give Sasuke a good challenge. Good luck you two, put on a good show. He cheered before shooting off away from the arena grounds. Kakashi nodded to Sasuke. Good luck, and remember what I told you. He said seriously with a look that he didn't let up until Sasuke nodded in return. Then he left in a swirl of leaves to the stands. Genma looked between the two genin with a small feeling of unease directed towards Gaara. The guy just gave off creepy vibes. His right hand slashed through the air. Begin. Naruto landed up with Jiraiya and retook his position under the umbrella with a content smile. Sasuke became strong. He said suddenly. The movement of his chakra and the density of it has improved drastically from what it was last I saw him a month ago. Kakashi isn't one to train in half measures. Jiraiya responded. He may seem lazy, but when he gets serious there are few that train as hard as he does. Just getting him to that point lately is tough from what I hear. Naruto snorted. Yeah, the guy didn't exactly train us into the ground. Down below, the fight began with Sasuke shooting forward at far faster speeds than what he was capable of before. To most he was a blur that was shooting in and out of Gaara's range to pepper him with testing blows. Sasuke tried all avenues of attack, shuriken, kunai, punches and kicks, and as he expected none of them broke through the sand. Gaara soon went on the offense and sent forward a wave of sand that Sasuke had speed away from with a body flicker lest he be crushed. As soon as Sasuke stopped moving, he shot a titanic fireball forward towards Gaara. Even in the stand they felt the terrible heat of the fire jutsu as it neared Gaara. As expected, sand rushed to block the fire, and when contact was made there was a large explosion that blasted away all the loose debris in the immediate area. Sasuke's jutsu are stronger thanks to his improved chakra and control over it. Commented Naruto. Jiraiya hummed. He'll need more than speed. Lee in the preliminaries was faster and that didn't win him the match. He said seriously as he watched the young Uchiha battle with Gaara. Sasuke flipped away from sand until he was halfway up the wall of the arena. He looked down at Gaara with a frown. Nothing he did was able to really get through, and now Gaara had locked himself behind a dome of sand that he wasn't getting through with brute strength. Knowing this was the scenario he prepared for, he started flashing through seals. "Oh," Naruto said lightly as the sounds of thousands of chirping birds filled the arena. "Interesting, that should do it. Curious jutsu to teach a genin." Jiraiya commented lightly with a frown but didn't add more. Sakura gasped as she saw the familiar lightning jutsu, then turned to Kakashi. "You taught him that jutsu from the bridge?" she shouted in shock. Kakashi's eye smiled at her. It was the best way for him to penetrate the defense of Gaara. "Sasuke and I are quite similar too, since we both share a lightning affinity and possess the Sharingan. It felt right teaching it to him," he said while watching Sasuke charge forward at ludicrous speeds towards Gaara. Lee in the seats next to them looked down with a frown. "It took a genius like Sasuke a month to catch up to my speeds," he whispered to himself. Guy narrowed his eyes at Kakashi as he stood to his feet. "After you gave me trouble for passing on the 8 gates formation, I didn't teach a genin an assassination jutsu," he reprimanded Kakashi at the hypocrisy. Kakashi only narrowed his eyes in response as he continued to observe the fight. "I only really have one shot here. Need to make sure I make it count," Sasuke mentally screamed as he blitzed forward with lightning speeds and slammed his Chidori into the sand dome, causing a wave of lightning to blast out in a dome around the point of impact. The world froze for a moment before a terrible scream erupted from the sand dome. "My blood. This is my blood," screamed Gaara as shock and pain overtook his mind. The sand dome exploded outward with spikes that forced Sasuke to jump away from. With his Sharingan, he noticed that there was a strange thick chakra spreading outwards from the sand as the screams grew in volume. Then everything went to hell. Naruto looked down at Gaara with his glasses held in his hands, completely exposing his glowing eyes. The 6 eyes told him what was happening with perfect clarity. "He's leaking tailed beast chakra at very high levels," commented Naruto with a frown before he noticed a wave of chakra cover the entire arena all the way to him, making him feel drowsy for a moment. "Genjutsu," thought Naruto before breaking it. Jiraiya shot to his feet, and not a moment later there was an explosion from the cage booth on the roof of the center building. "Maybe you were right," shouted Jiraiya before jumping off, but not before calling out to Naruto, "Deal with Gaara." Naruto turned back down to the field where Sasuke was being accosted by several sand ninja. He burst forward at top speed, slamming into one of them, smashing the guy into the ground with enough force to shatter all the bones in his body, turning the ground into a blood-filled crater. Naruto slowly stood to his feet and glanced at the remaining sand ninja, making them wary. He turned to Sasuke. "I'll deal with Gaara and these fools." "Get out of here," commanded Naruto, and to his complete shock Sasuke actually listened. Naruto was about to engage the sand ninja when a Senbon shot into the neck of the one on the left and Genma walked up next to him. "I'll take them. Gaara's all yours," said Genma with a grimace. Naruto assumed he didn't like leaving a genin to face someone like Gaara. Though, in the back of Naruto's head he didn't like the thought of fighting Gaara, but he pushed that away for now. Naruto nodded to Genma, then turned and shot over to Gaara, a Rasengan forming in his hand that grew to the size of a melon in a flash. The sand dome was no match for the jutsu and was blasted open, causing massive amounts of wind and sand to fly everywhere. Naruto wasted no time and shot his arm forward to drag Gaara out of the dome and threw him away. Gaara frantically got to his feet as sand was gathering all over his body, turning the right side of his body into a grotesque clawed sand arm. His face was taking on the appearance of the one tail as a single sandy tail waved behind him. "He's half possessed already. It would be trouble if he completely turned into the one tails in the center of the village. Which must be their plan," Naruto thought as he shot forward and re-engaged Gaara with ruthless attacks. Gaara, while empowered to levels that most Chunin and Jonin would be unable to overcome, was being taken to task by Naruto with ruthless efficiency. Gaara was unable to follow the blonde's rapid attacks and felt his body take substantial damage from each blow. If he didn't have the One Tail's chakra healing him, he would have likely been killed already. Claw slash, diverted with a kick, then followed up with an uppercut to the chest. Tail slam was caught and Gaara was sent crashing into the ground. Naruto ducked under another swipe from the massive claw and tsked, I know I'm hurting him. I bet he's being healed by the One Tails almost as fast as I'm injuring him. Which means I need to hurt him worse. He thought with a frown. Movement from his peripheral had Naruto jump back in time to dodge a blade of wind that shredded into the earth where he was just standing. Gaara's sensei and siblings arrived shortly after and landed around him protectively. Naruto grinned, after being so scared of him till now, all of you cowards think you'll protect him. I hate wishy-washy people like you, he said while pointing at them, his eyes glowing menacingly. Suppose I'll have to deal with all four of you, commented Naruto before moving to engage them. As soon as Sasuke's strike caused Gaara such terrible pain, the third Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi had been in a whirlwind of motion. First the booth exploded. He had avoided the blast by jumping up, but was caught in the air by the cage who held a blade to his throat. Then he realized foolishly that his student had taken the place of the cage and was using the exams as a means to destroy the village. Truly, Orochimaru, I have failed you, Hiruzen said mournfully, completely unconcerned with the kunai to his throat. Behind him Orochimaru tsked, having noticed the Hokage's calm aura, foolish old man, you think you're in control here? He demanded angrily. In the instant he asked, to which Orochimaru would later admonish himself for making such a mistake, he was blasted backward into